Now we will quickly look at the pricing. I just want to quickly look at the pricing over here. So if you look at the pricing, let's imagine this is actually a virtual server pricing. Okay, if you want to create a virtual server in AWS or you want to create virtual server in Azure. So if you look at the pricing, that if you are looking for a server which has two core processor, 8 GB RAM, it will cost you in Azure, it will cost you 62 cents. And in Azure, in AWS, it will cost you 66 cents. So if you look at the entire graph, table over here, you will find that AWS is a bit more expensive as compared to Azure. You can see this over here. You can see slightly expensive, not very expensive, but slightly expensive. But if you, it is just a 1 hour price. So if it is 66 cents, it is just 1 hour price. If you multiply by 100, right, then it's gonna make a difference. Right now, it looks very small. It might be 2 cent difference or 20 cents difference. But if you multiply by 100 hours, or maybe in a month, 750 hours, it's going to be create a lot of difference. So that's why AWS is considered to be bit pricey as compared to Azure. So if in case anyone asks you, like, from a cost perspective, which cloud has a lesser cost, then Azure is considered to be on a positive side, that Azure has a lesser cost as per AWS. Now, you must be wondering that, Naman, when AWS is expensive as compared to Azure, then why the market goes towards AWS? So it is all about trust. Okay, big enterprise, they don't look for the price, they don't care, because they have a lot of money. They just trust. Some organization, they trust Microsoft, so they go with Azure. Some organization, they trust AWS, so they go with AWS. Maybe startups or small organizations, they look at prices, but the bigger organizations and medium-sized organizations, they don't look at the price, they look at the quality of service, the market value, the trust. These are the important factors they look at. And also solution compatibility, which I'm going to come back very soon on that topic. When we will discuss about the conclusion, I'll talk about that solution compatibility. But right now, it is on the basis of prices. Medium-sized organization and large-size organization, they don't look at the price. But small-size organization and the startups, they look at the price and they compare and they go by the price. So that is why Azure is more popular, like in startups and small organizations as compared to AWS, because of the price. But just don't think that it is just 44 cents difference. But when you multiply it with number of hours in a year, you will realize that it'll basically cost you maybe $100 or $1,000 difference, which is huge. After that, coming to the market share, this is something which everyone should know. Okay, so AWS was actually one of the oldest cloud. Okay, it is actually started somewhere around 2006 or 2008. Like, I mean, not, I think so. Like somewhere at that point of time, it has started. It has a story that why it has started. So AWS was started because Amazon used to be a e-commerce website. They used to have a lot of servers with them, and during the whole year, they used to have a lot of servers. But from 25th of December to 1st of January, they used to use, like, let's say 100 servers, and rest of the year they used to use only 30 servers. Because it's a festive season, so from 25th of December to 1st of January, they used to use additional 70 servers, and those 70 servers used to sit idle throughout the rest of the year. Then what they got an idea that let's start rent out these machines to other organization rest of the year, so that the machines which are sitting idle, they can make money out of it. The AWS has started from that idea that the machines which are sitting idle, let's start renting out to entire world, and they started it. So that's how the AWS has started. So they started renting out machines, and that's how the cloud started forming up. And today, AWS is one of the oldest cloud. It has 49.5% of the market where the application workloads are installed and running. So applications, you see Netflix, Apple applications, different applications are running on AWS, and even Azure holds 15% of the market. So AWS stands on first and in terms of market share, and Azure stands on second, and Google stands on third with 7% of the market. Now, coming to the conclusion directly. Now, you would be wondering that, Naman, you are talking about prices. So in terms of prices, Azure wins. And in terms of market share, AWS wins. Which one is better? You must be having this question. And I truly expect this question from all of you. So again, there are a lot of factors on which it depends that which cloud you need to focus on. So when you're working for an organization, definitely you will look at the price, you will look at the trust, and you will look at the solution compatibility. So I want to explain this part. When I say solution compatibility, guys, always remember that there will be an application and or data which you want to move or migrate to cloud. So let's say you want to migrate application from your own server to Azure or to AWS. You have to look at the application and understand it. If your application is open source, is made up of open source tools, okay? If your application is made up of open source tools, then you go with AWS. Don't look at the pricing, don't look at the trust. That is a solution compatibility, that your application is actually a solution. So your solution is compatible with open source. It is made up of open source technology, then go with AWS. If your application is made up of is enterprise technology or maybe Microsoft technology, then Azure fits the best. Let's say that you are using .NET. .NET is Microsoft language framework. If you're at the other end, there is a Node.js framework, then you go with AWS. So that's what we have found as per my experience, that if your solution is open source, choose AWS. If your solution or application is enterprise based like Microsoft or different enterprises, then go with Azure. That's the best thing which we can always choose cloud, Azure or AWS. Now, coming from a market perspective, that job market perspective, that hey Naman, I am coming from a non-IT background, should I choose AWS or Azure? This question I hear from a lot of new students who join us, that which one I should go and choose. I would say it's job market for Azure and AWS is pretty same. There is not a very big difference. If you are new, you can get into any one of the cloud, but you have to follow the proper route. It means if you are starting your journey with Azure, first you will go with Azure fundamentals, then you will go for Azure admin, and then you go for Azure architect. So this is the journey you have to follow in order to make sure that you are, you want to succeed in Azure, and then you can go for Azure DevOps. But in case you want to go with AWS, then you have to start with AWS Solution Architect Associate, then you go towards Solution Architect Professional, or you go towards AWS DevOps. So or maybe DevOps like Jenkins, Terraform. These are very important technology you can always choose. So what I would suggest you is that if you are choosing the Azure route, stick to Azure fundamentals, Azure administrator, Azure architect, and after that Azure DevOps. So this is the route which is normally followed by an individual who wants to get their career into Azure. But when you want to get into AWS, okay, AWS starts with AWS Solution Architect. After that, you get into DevOps. Okay, DevOps offers Jenkins, Terraform, Kubernetes, Docker, and Ansible. So you go in that route. So these are two separate routes. So for Azure, I repeat, first step is Azure Fundamental. Second step is to go for Azure Administrator. Third step is to go for Azure Architect. And after that, you go for Azure DevOps. This is how you upskill yourself in Azure. Now, when you talk about AWS, you start your journey with AWS Solution Architect, and then you go into DevOps. DevOps consists of multiple different courses: Terraform, Jenkins, Linux, Ansible, Docker, Kubernetes. These are the courses you have to follow. If you do this, that you know Azure fundamental and then you try to get into Jenkins, that won't help you. I'm telling you, that won't help you. These two clouds have their own route to be followed. If you try to jump into like from administrator, you come into Jenkins, that might not help you. You should follow Azure route and create your resume Azure friendly. If you are getting into AWS, create your resume DevOps friendly. This is what you have to do. Always remember, your last goal is to become Azure DevOps engineer or DevOps engineer here if you follow AWS. But knowing the cloud is very important. If you really want to get into DevOps, knowing the cloud is very important. People who get into DevOps directly, they actually make a mistake. They don't understand a lot of things. So the way we do, right? We go to school first, and then we go for graduation and bachelor's in graduation. And then after that, we go for master's, and then we go for PhD. This is the route we follow. Every time you should follow the same route. If you are choosing Azure, go for Azure Fundamental, Azure Administrator, Azure Architect, and Azure DevOps. If you follow AWS route, AWS Solution Architect, DevOps, this is what you need to follow. So this is what I wanted to share to all of you, so that you guys can take decision better, that which should be your next step. There will be hundreds of people who will be talking differently, but trust me guys, honestly speaking, this is the route everyone should follow. If you try to dissect, if you try to get into multiple things, you will be lost and you will be nowhere. Coming to the conclusion, okay, last conclusion, which I want to talk to every one of you, that AWS is considered like who should prefer AWS and who should prefer Azure. So AWS is actually for IT specialist, okay, which is like, or non-IT specialist. You can say non-IT is for Azure and AWS both. So if someone is coming from non-IT background, can step into any one of them. But it provides a lot of power, flexibility, freedom, customization freedom, and third-party connections, which is the open source connections. But Azure is easy to use because it follows all the Microsoft products and it fits with Microsoft products like Microsoft Windows, or you can say, .NET framework, which is again provided by Microsoft. So if the solution is provided by Microsoft, stick to Azure. If it is open source, stick to AWS. That's what I would say everyone at last. So this was it, guys.
Thank you for watching. Switch from non-IT to IT today. Explore www.thinkcloudly.com.